I've been looking into the mysterious case of Dammion Heard for over 7 years. In that time, I've conducted dozens of my own interviews and reviewed hundreds of pages of police reports and documents on his case. But there are still so many unanswered questions and witnesses that have never been interviewed. In this special bonus episode, I talked to 3 people that the Gunnison police never contacted for statements. All of them came to me after hearing this podcast. I was surprised to find out that they had new information on Dammion's case and what his plans were on the final weekend of his life. In addition, an intrepid listener sent in a tip about a fascinating research study on features of staged homicides. The author, Dr. Claire Ferguson, joins us in the second half of this episode. She compares Dammion's case to other suicides that were later proven to be staged homicides. What do they have in common, and how do they differ? Stay tuned to find out. From Cold Case Productions, this is Final Days on Earth, The Life and Death of Dammion Heard. Episode 13, Part 1, New Witnesses. I'm your host, Claire Sanamaw. Thanks for listening. Because Dammion's dad, Gary Heard, is such a big part of the podcast, close listeners often ask me about Dammion's mom. Through my time in crime reporting both for 48 Hours and Final Days on Earth, I've learned it's common for one parent to be vocal and one to stay silent after a child's death. It's also quite common, like in this case, for the parents to split up. It's an unspeakably sad world to outlive your children, and it's a natural reaction to not want to talk about it. I never press a parent for an interview, but I always want them to have the opportunity to participate if they feel comfortable with it. I had contacted Dammion's mom, Jamie Heard, before the podcast came out, and it was just too emotional for her to speak with me then. I respected that and told her to reach out if she ever felt like talking. After the podcast dropped, she got back in touch.
Thanks so much for reconnecting with me. I know it's not an easy thing or a simple thing to go back to and to talk about. Appreciate that you sent me that note and told me to call you.
Yeah, I heard the first one.
I'll just leave it open to you. Do you want me to tell you more about the podcast? Do you have any questions for me, or do you want me to go into some interview questions?
You can go ahead and go into some interview questions.
With Jamie on board, I jumped right in.
How would you describe Dammion for someone who's never met him?
Sweet. He always tried to make people laugh.
Yeah, I have definitely heard that he was a big joker. People called him, the class clown. Yeah, he would do anything for a laugh. He was always up, for a good time and to try to entertain people.
Yes, he would go out of his way to make people happy. If you're having a bad day or whatever.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I know it's so hard, and I don't want you to feel bad about, getting emotional, and you can take a minute and gather yourself. I'm not, I'm not in any hurry or anything.
At this point, we took a little break. Jamie said she often talks to friends about Dammion, and they share stories from his childhood. She said his legacy as a parent, not only in the memories, but also in several friends who have named their kids Dammion in his honor.
One girl has his son's middle name is Dammion, and then one wrestling buddy named his kid Dammion.
Wow, well, that's really special. I can definitely tell he was a really sweet kid and one who made an impression.
We talked more about Dammion growing up and the role that wrestling played in his life from an early age.
What do you remember about Dammion growing up as far as wrestling? Was it just something he was drawn to right away, or were there other sports that he played?
No, he just did wrestling. He was a natural at it.
What was it like, whenever you found out that he was going to get a scholarship to college, with wrestling?
I was thrilled. I couldn't be any happier.
Yeah. So many parents hope for their children that they would get a scholarship to college. That's such a huge accomplishment.
That was his dream.
In his short life, he accomplished so many of his goals that were not not easy goals, you know. They were really, he won the state championship when he was in high school, and then he got a scholarship to college. I mean, that's really impressive.
Yeah, and to keep up his GPA as well. I was amazed.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of pressure and a lot of things going on at that age, and yeah, to be able to stay the course and do those things is really really admirable.
Yeah, he was very disciplined on. He would get himself up at 5:30 in the morning to go running with his coach.
Wow, that's definitely a lot of discipline, especially for a teenage kid. I mean, I remember sleep was like gold when I was a teenager. I couldn't get enough of it.
Right, like let me sleep. I don't want to go do anything else.
Totally. If you're comfortable with it, can we talk a little bit about when he went off to college and what happened?
Yeah.
So tell me about Dammion in college. Were you guys still talking a lot? Was he, pretty busy? I know he had a lot of demands. Did he stay in touch with you guys?
Yes. I mean, he talked to his dad more than he did me, but we talked every Saturday. That was our thing. So he can talk to his little brother. Even on the 29th, he told me he was going to that party.
I'm so sorry, Jamie. I'm so sorry. You remember hearing that he was going to that party?
Oh, yeah, he said he was going to the party with his friend Bubba and all them, and there's a wrestling party.
If you recall from earlier episodes, Bubba was the nickname for Devin Zavala, another freshman wrestler and one of Dammion's best friends. Jamie remembered Dammion referring to an event where there was leftover beer that the wrestlers were allowed to take back for that party that night. This tracks with what other witnesses said about that weekend, when the Crab Feed fundraiser was held on campus. At 20 years old, Dammion was understandably excited about the prospect of getting free beer.
So I told him to have fun, be careful, call me the next day, because he said he was going hiking. He had planned to go hiking the next day.
Because of how carefully I have pored over the witness statements in Dammion's case, this detail immediately jumped out as an outlier. No one has ever mentioned Dammion hiking at Western, much less that he had plans to go hiking on Sunday, the same day Lyndon Ianhauser saw his SUV at the head of the hiking trail at Cabin Creek. I didn't want to spook Jamie about the possible significance of this information right away, so I tried to play it cool. The key word here is tried.
Okay. Do you remember what he said about going hiking? Did he say any place where he was going hiking?
He didn't say where he was going hiking. He just said him and some buddies were going hiking. He didn't even mention who was going hiking with him.
I made it about 15 seconds before I came clean with Jamie.
Hey, that's interesting. You're actually the first person to tell me that. I never heard that he had planned to go hiking with some friends the next day. That's interesting to me, actually. Do you remember if he said they were wrestling friends, or did you just kind of assume because that's who his friends were whenever he did anything?
Yeah, I just assumed they were. They were just the wrestling team, the wrestling buddies that he hung out with.
In the 47 witness interviews that Gunnison Police conducted in this case, not a single person mentioned having plans to go hiking with Dammion on Sunday.
So this hike, did he say anything else about, any other details stick out in your mind about that conversation, about the hike, or about anything else?
No, just that. That was it, that he was going hiking and that he would call me on Sunday after he got done hiking.
Wow.
And then I remember Jerry asking me if I've heard from him, and I said no. That was on Sunday evening, and I said no. I said he was supposed to go hiking. And then Monday is when Gary reported him missing and everything.
The fact that Jamie specifically remembered Dammion mentioning plans to go hiking with his buddies, and then his body is later found at the entrance of a hiking area, feels important to me. It's also information that I know the Gunnison Police never had. It's not in their 187-page police report, and none of the official witness interviews include this detail. A few things stick out in my mind about this. No one has ever been able to connect Dammion to the Cabin Creek location where his body was found. In all the police interviews, Dammion's friends never mentioned him going on hikes at all, let alone that weekend. In fact, many of Dammion's friends, including Devin Zavala, said Dammion didn't like outdoor activities. This is Devin talking to Detective Grace Cowan on April 2nd, 2014, just a few hours before authorities would discover Dammion's body.
Does he run?
No, he hates running. He hates running. He's lazy.
Okay. So no cross-country skiing or anything like that?
None of that. No hikes, none of that. He's not that type of person at all.
Okay, so he wouldn't go out on a hike by himself? So.
No, he'd rather play a video game than do that.
I wanted to get Dammion Heard's reaction to the idea that her son wasn't an outdoorsy guy.
A lot of Dammion's friends, whenever he was missing and before the body was found, and even afterwards, they all said, you know, he doesn't go on hikes. He's not a hiker at all. I have multiple quotes, Bubba especially. He said, no hikes, no nothing. And I thought...
No, see, Dammion was an adventure type of person because him and his dad would go camping, canoeing. So for them to say that he didn't go, hiking or anything, that Dammion likes to explore.
The idea that he went hiking while he was up there, nobody really talked about that.
Jamie said the information about Dammion planning to go on a hike would have been pretty easy for Gunnison Police investigators to learn, if only they had asked her.
So you're the first person that's ever reached out to me.
Really?
Yes. And no one's reached out to me, so they don't know that last conversation that we had.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, the police should have talked to you. The police never interviewed you?
No.
That makes zero sense to me. I saw the call log that you guys talked. I knew that you FaceTimed with him on Saturday. There was some text back and forth, you saying that, your brother wants to talk to you or something, and you guys, I saw that. It was obvious that you guys talked that last day. The police should have called you to find out about that conversation. They talked to Gary about the last conversation he had with Dammion. They should have called you too, and you had different information.
I talked to Dammion after Gary did. Mine was at 3-something.
Okay.
Because that's how we were looking. We were like, man, was I actually the last person to talk to him in Texas down here before he went to that party?
Yeah.
On the phone, physically
Right.
on the phone.
Right.
No matter where you stand on the suicide versus homicide theory of Dammion's death, I think we can all agree that not interviewing the victim's mother, especially when they were one of the last people to talk to him before his death, is unacceptable. I thought maybe they just didn't record an interview with Dammion's mom, but according to Jamie, they never even had one. And the information that they missed appears to be a pretty big piece of the puzzle.
The idea that he had these plans to go hiking, that's so interesting to me. Number one, because I never heard that from anyone else. And number two, because several of his friends were asked directly if he hiked, if he ran, if he did stuff like that. And they said no. So that's interesting.
Oh, wow.
I know. So I was really believing that he didn't like to do that kind of stuff. I knew about the childhood camping, and I knew about the river, that he liked to do stuff in the river, but I guess what came up a lot was that it was winter and it was cold, and that he didn't like being out there in the cold. That they didn't think he would go hiking this time of year. But he told you he was planning on going hiking Sunday. See, that's really interesting.
Yeah. He said he was going to go hiking with some buddies, and then he was going to go talk to the counselor the next day.
So he had a whole plan for Sunday.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to me, because I've often wondered what got him to that location at Cabin Creek. And it is a place where people go hiking and mountain biking and run trails and stuff. And now I'm wondering if that was a place where he had planned to meet people and, it has some connection. That invitation to go hiking, that has some connection to where he was found. And man, would I love to know who he was going hiking with on Sunday. No one admitted to that.
Well,
All those people that were interviewed.
I do now. I'm curious now since no one mentioned it.
Yeah, no one mentioned it, Jamie. Not a single person ever said we were supposed to go hiking Sunday. No one said that. No one.
Wow.
I'd really like to know. Oof, man. I'd really like to know who he was going to go hiking with.
That's another piece of the puzzle.
It is. No, I really think it is a piece of the puzzle. One I didn't even know existed. So that's very intriguing to me. You've got my mind racing in all sorts of directions now, thinking about how I can go about trying to get this information.
Claire Sanamaw here, and if you know me at all, you know how much I love summer. You can find me hanging out by the pool, visiting family, or catching the latest movie. Simple pleasures that are downright thrilling compared to last summer's entertainment options. If you want your brain to feel like it's summertime all the time, download Best Fiends, the refreshingly fun puzzle game where there's always something new to play every day. I'm on level 45 now, so I've been making lots of progress. I like how Best Fiends pairs puzzles with an adventure quest, but the really fun part is strategically teaming up with characters based on their special abilities to gain extra points and level up your fiends. There's just so much to love about this game. It's no wonder it has 100 million downloads and counting. Download the 5-star rated puzzle game Best Fiends free today on the App Store or Google Play. That's Friends without the R. Best Fiends. Do you ever get that feeling late at night that you're not really alone? When Simply Safe Home Security's founders, Chad and Eleanor Lawrence, designed their first security system in their kitchen, they did it for a very personal reason. Their friends had just had their home broken into. They were struggling to find a security system that was simple to set up and would make them feel safe again. Making people feel safe is what Simply Safe has been doing ever since that moment 15 years ago. A passion to protect people not only drives every engineering detail in its products, but it motivates every interaction with its customers. Simply Safe has highly trained security experts ready whenever you need them, whether that's during a fire, a burglary, a medical emergency, or even just when you're setting up the system. There's always someone there who has your back to keep you safe. To learn more about how Simply Safe can help protect you and your family today, visit simplysafe.com/finaldays to customize your system and get a free security camera. That's simplysafe.com/finaldays. Something else that came up in my conversation with Jamie that bears mentioning here is Dammion's exposure to people who committed suicide by hanging.
My brother-in-law committed suicide by hanging in 2011. When they said that's what they mean, then I was like, there's no way. Because we talked about it.
Yeah.
You know, after his uncle did it, he was like, there's no way I could do that to anybody. He watched his nieces and nephew go through that.
Yeah.
Then prior to that, I think he may have been 11 or 12. His best friend's dad committed suicide by hanging himself.
Wow.
So, you know, he's had two people that's hung themselves.
Academic research supports the concept of suicide contagion, especially among younger people. To put it in layman's terms, suicide is socially contagious, and having a friend or relative die by suicide does increase your own chance of suicidal ideation and self-harm. While it might seem counterintuitive, studies suggest that being exposed to suicide is one indicator of the likelihood of future self-harm.
You know, after that happens, you always sit and you have that conversation.
Of course.
You know, if you feel that way, how would, you know?
Yeah.
And he's like, I wouldn't hang myself because that's just too painful. You know, just the thought of it.
Wow, so you actually had a conversation with him about, because of what had happened to these, friends and family members, you actually had talked to him about hanging, and he had specifically said that it would be too painful and he would never do that?
Yeah.
That's pretty wild right there.
Since the podcast came out, a big part of what I do is field tips and suggestions from listeners. I'm truly grateful for every piece of information that comes to me. One of those people who contacted me was Dammion's RA from Western.
Name's Joe Montiano. At Western, I went by Joey. I was Dammion's RA his freshman year.
Joey and Dammion had a lot in common.
I was friends with a lot of his friends at Western because I was a wrestler in high school, so I knew a lot of the wrestlers in Colorado. I was pretty close with some of his teammates. I saw Dammion almost every day, probably in passing throughout the school year, his freshman year. I ate lunch with him and his teammates probably once or twice a week.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot of contact. I'm sure you have a lot of memories of those guys.
Yeah, it was a pretty good bunch.
Yeah, so what was their dynamic like? I mean, how would you describe them, as a group, and how did Dammion fit in with them?
Yeah, it was always playful and fun, not too much of a bad time. But I learned pretty quickly when I was a freshman in college that they got pretty rowdy at parties, and it was something I was tolerant of for a while, and then after a few incidents my freshman year, and then with being an RA my sophomore year, I decided I needed to scale back from hanging out with the wrestling team as a whole.
While Joey didn't party with the wrestlers anymore, he still saw them around campus a lot.
And I had classes with quite a few of the wrestlers, and I became pretty good friends with some of them too. But as far as Dammion mixing in, he was another one of the guys, a part of the wrestling team. It was fun to talk about his high school successes with him and get to know what he wanted to do outside of school once he was done at Western, and also knowing that it seemed like he had a pretty good supporting cast around him.
So you mentioned that the parties at the wrestler's house could get pretty out of hand. Do you have, and I know you're not talking about, that night or even that year, but do you have memories of those parties, specific memories of how they got out of hand? What comes to mind? Why would you say that?
Yeah, they're just, I guess, and with being a former wrestler, and I'm a wrestling coach, so I guess I understand it, but there's just a level of intensity and ego that some wrestlers tend to have, and it doesn't match well when there's other people with big egos. So I used to, almost every party I went to, not necessarily at the wrestler's house, but any party I went to with wrestlers, there's always some type of fight or altercation, and it all started with being mouthy, and someone would usually get punched or tackled or something.
Okay, that's interesting. So that was the idea that there was a fight or multiple fights the night that Dammion disappeared. That wasn't unusual for what you knew for parties at the wrestler's house?
Yeah, not necessarily at the wrestler's house, but just parties with the wrestlers in general, whether it's at their house or not at their house.
Okay. It had sort of been presented that having a fight, that Dammion having those fights, that was really unusual, and that, it caused this big rift, and, it was just, not a normal night. But you're saying it maybe wasn't that unusual, actually, to have fights at wrestling parties.
Yeah, generally any parties that wrestlers went to. That's why I stopped hanging out with them, because I didn't want to get in any fights or be a part of that. But I think generally speaking, though, most of the wrestlers didn't. It was more of a freshman thing, to be honest. A lot of the upperclassmen didn't participate in that, and I think that's maybe where you might have heard that the fighting wasn't okay, because it was mostly freshmen who would, the new tough guys on campus.
Okay.
Think they'd have to prove themselves.
Next, I wanted to talk to Joe about March 29th, 2014.
I ended up going home that weekend. But that Thursday was the last time I saw him, and we actually ate lunch. I believe we ate lunch or dinner together in the Rare Air Cafe, and I just asked him what his plans were, and he told me that he was probably just going to do the usual, like maybe go for a hike because the weather was supposed to be nice that weekend. And
I couldn't believe that a second person who was never interviewed by police was also bringing up Dammion's plans to go on a hike the weekend he disappeared. It's not like Dammion's mom would be chatting with his former RA. These are two very different witnesses in different states and social circles, with the same information about Dammion's statements during his final days on Earth. This is what police call corroborating information, and it's a pretty big deal in a death investigation.
Dammion said maybe he was going to go hiking that weekend, the last time you saw him?
yeah.
Did you have any idea where he might go hiking, or where he'd gone in the past hiking?
No, I honestly don't. I know one of the popular places is like Ohio Creek Pass area, or Mill Creek. Those are pretty popular areas for people to go hiking.
Okay.
Also, where the area his body was found is kind of common as well. Not as pretty in that specific area, but.
Well, see, that's interesting because you're actually the first person to tell me that anybody at Western hiked there.
Yeah, it wasn't a popular spot. The only reason why people would maybe go there is because that time there's still snow up in the other areas, so possibly less amount of snow in that specific area.
But you did know that sometimes people hiked there. It wasn't a completely unknown location to students in your mind?
I mean, almost everybody, if they were coming from the Denver area, had to pass that area.
Okay.
So, I mean, I had hiked there before, like my freshman year.
Okay, that's interesting. And is that home for you, Denver? Is that where you're from?
Yeah, in the area, the surrounding area.
Okay. I have friends in Littleton. Is that
okay? Yeah, I know where that is.
Yeah.
It's probably like 20 minutes south of where I was at.
Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. Just trying to put that in context because so many times people told me, "Oh, no one ever goes hiking out there. No one goes there. I'd never even heard of that place," and so it made it seem even more bizarre and remote that he was there. But I don't know. Just because one person hasn't heard of it doesn't mean everyone hasn't heard of it. And you also don't know people's motivation for saying that, being really insistent about, I've never been there, I've never heard of it, I don't know anything about it. Some people are really adamant about that to the point where I found it kind of interesting. You being like, oh no, people go there. I mean, you're the first person to just casually say that, because it seems like, you're just like, yeah, it's a place that some people went, whereas other people wanted to make sure that, for whatever their reasons might be, maybe just genuinely they had never heard of it and never knew of anyone who hiked there, or maybe they're trying to distance themselves from it. I don't know. But it's just always interesting people's, different perspectives. So that's helpful for me to know that it is not a completely unknown place to go hiking. There are people who go there. It's maybe not a favorite spot or the most scenic spot, but it is a place that people hike.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like the nicest spot to go to.
Right.
It's a spot.
The other thing that I'm curious about is, as far as the bicycles that were seen, out there that were tied to a post.
Here I'm referring to the two mountain bikes that hiker Linda Nienhauser saw whenever she went to Cabin Creek on Sunday, March 30th, 2014.
Mountain biking, is that something that you knew the wrestlers did, or that Dammion did? Is that something that was a hobby of theirs?
No. There was maybe a select few of wrestlers that mountain biked, but none that I know of. I mean, I could probably think of one that was a mountain biker, and I don't even know if he stayed on the wrestling team his whole year, his freshman year. So.
Do you mind telling me who that is? I'm just curious.
Yeah, Frankie Dunbar, I think that's his last name, or Frankie.
Yeah, I actually talked to him. Yeah.
Yeah, he was pretty outdoorsy guy.
Okay.
So I don't know if he was a mountain biker. I just
Sure.
that would be my one guess.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting just because everything I heard about the wrestlers is they were really into longboarding. It was like a common thing, but I never heard mountain bikes, and then the two mountain bikes being there just made me wonder, you know, who has mountain bikes? Is it people on the wrestling team? Is it, you know, other people? Someone had, you know, these two bikes and was there, and those people have never been identified. We don't know if they have anything to do with Dammion's death, but we know that they were around his body before the police were, and, you know, that they didn't report it. The only person who reported it was, you know, this hiker named Linda. So I've always been hopeful that we could identify those bikers, and, you know, it makes sense that those bikes came out of that white truck. So
Yeah.
the idea that the police have said, like, oh, you know, we don't, like, believe that there was anyone else there with Dammion's body, that's the part that I'm like, to me, completely incomprehensible that there could be a second vehicle and two bicycles, plus Dammion's car, and there's nobody else out there. Who drove that car? What person brings two bicycles? You know, Dammion didn't drive two cars and ride two bicycles before he died. To me, the thing that makes the most sense is there's at least one person, but likely two. You don't bring two bicycles for one person. Maybe in rare circumstances. I have some friends that are like super hardcore bikers, and sometimes they bring multiple bikes, you know, for different types of trails, but that seems like pretty unusual idea. You know, I think a much more likely scenario is two bikes.
Yeah, at one point, didn't they say that car was registered to one of, like, a wrestler's uncle or something?
So a white truck with a camper shell was registered to Kyle Pyatt's parents. The police have said that they don't believe that that was his white truck at the scene, but the evidence that they cite for why it wasn't his white truck is that the witness believed that she saw breast cancer awareness license plates on the vehicle. Now later, because I talked to her also, she said, well, it might have been a placard, it might have been a sticker, it was something pink, you know, but at the time that she gave the interview, the police really latched on to it being a official breast cancer awareness license plate. They didn't look at anything that wasn't, you know, that official Colorado plate, and Kyle Pyatt's parents did not have a breast cancer awareness license plate registered with the state of Colorado.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
I asked Joe to elaborate on what else Dammion had said during their lunch on Thursday at the Rare Air Cafe. Joe had said that Dammion mentioned probably doing, quote, the usual.
The usual meant hanging out with the team and drinking, especially because it was right after the season was over. And we just talked a little bit about classes and how his new arrangement with his roommate was going, because they had previously gotten an argument, and I had to meddle between that a little bit since I was their RA.
This tracks with what Devin Zavala told police about an altercation between Dammion and his roommate, Lance Bradford.
So that's kind of how our last interaction went. And then I got back to campus that Sunday. And shortly after I got back, probably within it was in the afternoon, cops knocked on my door asking me if I'd seen him. I said, I had no idea what they're talking about. I just got home. And they were like, okay, so you haven't seen Dammion? I'm like, no, I have not. Let me know if you have any other questions. So I went to my other wrestling friends and started asking, and they also had no idea where Dammion had went. And then I believe it was that Monday or Tuesday, whenever his card supposedly got scanned or used for lunch.
Yes.
One of the wrestlers, I saw him in passing, and he's like, hey, I guess Dammion's all right. They found him. They used, his lunch card was used or something. And then shortly after that, when his body was found, clearly I learned that hadn't actually happened.
As dedicated listeners of this podcast know, Dammion's ID card registering on the university system 3 separate times while he was a missing person is one of my biggest sources of interest in his case.
Do you remember who told you he's okay? They used, he used his card, or they knew that he used his card?
Yeah, at the time, it was Zach Shank.
Okay.
What's notable about this in the timeline of events is that the police investigation into Dammion's disappearance hadn't started yet. So how did Zach Shank know that Dammion's ID card had been used in the cafeteria? It's not like the university releases that kind of information to students.
I'm trying to put everything together like in a timeline, so that's interesting, just trying to, because a lot of what you're saying actually is not in the police report. Like, your name's not in the police report, the fact that they knocked on your door, I didn't know that, and it's like almost a 200-page police report, so I felt like it was pretty thorough, but as I talk to more people, I'm finding so much stuff that was left out.
Yeah, I know I read that was like 180 pages or something.
You did?
And I read the whole police report, and I even did a ride-along a year later with the police department, and I know they probably are not allowed to tell me much, but I asked about it, and they completely, when I asked about it, the cop was even like, yeah, we're not going to talk about this tonight, and I was like, oh, okay.
Wow, that's interesting. Do you remember the officer?
I don't, to be honest, I do not.
I told Joe he was in good company.
They wouldn't talk to me either.
Of course, I had to ask Joe more about the ID card.
I've often thought that, even though it wasn't Dammion, that somebody did sign him into class and did use his card in the cafeteria. Have you heard anything about someone doing that? Like, maybe they thought he was, for whatever reason, maybe they thought they were helping him out so he wouldn't get in trouble for skipping class or something, but has that ever come up that, I think so-and-so signed him into class or anything like that?
No, I honestly don't know. I don't know that much detail.
Yeah, no, I was just curious, like, people just accepted that, it was a mistake, he didn't sign into class, it was just bad information? Is that what it kind of was thought to be?
That's what it sounded like to me. I mean, I remember, I don't know if it was the next day or how much longer it was, but I remember Zach was like, I guess he's not the one that used it, or he seemed confused. Like, yeah. Initially he seemed relieved, and then he seemed confused.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, what happened, with his family too. I mean, they thought, okay, he's in class, the school says he's in class, and then they had to come back and say, like, no, he wasn't in class then, so that's been a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Next, I wanted to talk to Joe about something he had included in his initial email to me on my website.
So what you wrote, in your comment whenever you first contacted me was that some of the wrestlers, whenever you'd be hanging out with them and the topic would come up, that they wouldn't want to talk about it. Can you kind of tell me about the memories that you have of that?
Yeah, so it was my junior year. It was his sophomore year. Bubba and I came pretty close his sophomore year.
It's me, Claire Sanama. Let's talk about your best defense for the unexpected. Are you prepared if the unthinkable happens? If a medical emergency arises, Air Medcare Network provides members with world-class emergency air transport services to the nearest hospital with no out-of-pocket expenses. Join today and never pay a dime for your medical flight when flown by an AMCN provider. Insurance doesn't always cover the full cost of a medical emergency, so this is a great way to secure financial peace of mind. Memberships cost as little as $85 a year for your entire household. And right now, as a listener of my show, you'll get up to a $50 Visa or Amazon gift card with a new membership. Visit airmedcarenetwork.com/final and use offer code FINAL. No matter where you're at in the game of life, an Air Medcare Network membership is the protection no one should live without. Once again, Joe is referring to Devin Zavala by his nickname, Bubba.
Because he was an RA his sophomore year, and I was RA again my junior year.
Okay.
And we'd go out and hang out when we were done, especially during training at the beginning of the fall semester. It'd been like fall 2014 or something. And I would mention it a couple times, and he would just be like, hey, like, we don't talk about that. And that would be it. Like, I wouldn't probe because I wanted to just chill and have a good time, so I wouldn't probe too much. But that would be the conversation. It would end right there. Hey, we don't talk about that. Or that's a sensitive topic.
Yeah. There could be all sorts of reasons for that, I'm sure. I mean, it's hard, to talk about death and loss and everything. But with this case and so many unanswered questions, it does make you think, what possibly do they not want to talk about,
Yeah.
As we were finishing up our conversation, I asked Joe if he had any other thoughts.
Is there anything else you can think of about, the time after Dammion went missing and when his body was found and, the next months and years that stands out?
Yeah, not too much. I mean, I do firmly believe that the Gunnison Police Department didn't really, I guess, for lack of better terms, dot their I's and cross their T's with the whole investigation. And there's never more known. I felt like it was kind of a lead that was never thoroughly investigated on with the car situation and the car that was there that the person who found Dammion saw, all that information. I felt like there could have been more with it, or the fact that I think there was a hair or something.
While you surely recognize the first point Joe made about the white truck that's never been identified from the scene, you probably aren't familiar with the second one, the hair. Despite how detailed this podcast has been, there are still breadcrumbs of evidence out there that I haven't had a chance to talk about. And this unidentified and sadly uncollected long blonde hair is one of them. It was found during Dammion's autopsy.
Long blonde hair that was found actually in Dammion's clenched fist. When his body was cut down and taken to the medical examiner. Unfortunately, that hair was not collected, so it can never be tested. All we have is a picture of it from the autopsy photos to know that it exists, that there was a long blonde female hair in his fist. That's all we have because they didn't collect it, which is pretty poor investigative work. I'm trying to choose my words very carefully. It's unbelievable, really, that there could be a piece of evidence like a human hair that clearly does not belong to the victim. Dammion doesn't have long blonde hair, that's not collected and not tested and is just lost on the floor of the medical examiner's office. Only reason we know it exists is because of the photos they took of his body, lying on that exam table. And if we can see it in the photos, how could they not, see it to collect it? But they never did.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's really hard with stuff like that because it's just gone. We can't get that hair back. Can't know anything more about it than that picture. It's just sort of haunting these pieces of information that could have been really good had they been followed up at the time. I mean, people have asked me about his cell phone pings and towers, and I'm like, yeah, that would have been an amazing thing for the police to subpoena, the cell phone tower records, and they could have done that, but they didn't. So it's just a coulda, woulda, shoulda sort of situation.
The next person to reach out to me after hearing the podcast was someone I had tried very hard to get a hold of in the past, former cross-country runner and so-called captain, Sam Vandeveld. As you might remember, multiple witnesses told Gunnison Police that Sam, the captain of the cross-country team, broke up the fight between Dammion and Anthony Rios in the front yard of the wrestler's house. But as far as I could tell, the police never even attempted to contact Sam to confirm this information or find out what else he might have seen that night and in the ones that followed. The same day the 12th episode of this podcast dropped, Sam got in touch with me on social media. We set up a call for the next day.
So thanks so much for doing this, Sam. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I didn't know you tried to reach out. Don't know how, but...
Yeah, I had reached out. I tried to reach out a couple different ways. just looking up different contact information I had for you and through social media, but I wasn't sure if anything had even gone through. Honestly, I didn't know if you got it.
I'm not sure how that missed, but yeah. So sorry about that.
No problem at all.
I dove right in with my questions.
And so in the spring of 2014, what year were you and what were you doing at Western at that time?
Yeah, I must have been, I guess, a senior. My last semester was the next semester. Just going to school.
At that time, were you the captain of the cross country team? I'd heard that from a couple of people.
No.
You weren't?
I wasn't the captain. I don't know that we even had a captain per se. I had a good season, but I wasn't captain by any means.
Okay, all right. It's just something that people said. I mean, you never know. That maybe
they viewed me as a captain. I'm not sure.
There you go. That was their perception of you, it would appear. I'd heard of you, Anthony Rios. And did he also go by Anthony Thomas?
I think so.
I wasn't sure if there were two different people, an Anthony Rios and Anthony Thomas, or if it was him and he had like two last names or like.
No, that does sound familiar, but I want to say they're the same person.
I kind of think they're the same person, but I didn't know if.
I can't remember. He was a freshman. I don't think how long he stayed around. I don't know.
Okay.
Although everyone in police interviews referred to Anthony as Anthony Rios, the cross-country roster for 2013-2014 listed freshman Anthony Thomas from Brush, Colorado, as a runner. The roster the next year did not include Anthony Thomas or Anthony Rios. So it would appear that Sam's impression that Anthony, quote, didn't stick around too long as a member of the cross-country team was accurate.
Did you know who Dammion Heard was before this event?
I did not.
Okay. And the night that we're talking about is March 29th, 2014, the night that the party took place at the wrestler's house. Does that ring a bell for you? It was the night of the crab feed fundraiser, if that helps at all.
Yeah, I hadn't had anything to do with the crab feed. All I can remember, like thinking back to this night, was walking by, stopping to this party, thinking it was weird, was outside, and then Dammion and Anthony were getting in a fight, and I just pushed them off each other, took Anthony away. Yeah.
All right, so before you got to that party, were you on foot? Did you walk up to the party and you saw it was...
Yeah, I kind of walked up. I think I was just like, I don't remember exactly why I would have been there per se. I think it was just a party that was outflowing to the street and kind of just, maybe I knew someone was talking to him. Can't really remember exactly. Just I didn't like a fight going on. Yeah,
so the fight, do you remember seeing like the fight was in progress or did you see it start?
I saw it in progress.
Can you describe what you saw from your memory?
I just remember Dammion, I think, was on top of Anthony, like trying to throw punches at him, and I just pulled him off and then took Anthony, picked him up, and got him out of there.
Okay. And do you remember what happened with Dammion after that, if anything, that you saw?
No, I don't, unfortunately. I really didn't know who he was. I just knew I needed to get my teammate out of there.
And so after you got Anthony and you guys left, where did you go?
I remember walking towards the school and just trying to calm him down because he was very upset. And I just don't really confidently recall. I think we walked him towards Mountaineer Village or his dorm. I really don't recall.
Something, maybe this will help jog your memory, maybe not. Does the name Dylan Winechant ring a bell for you at all?
Does not.
Okay.
What is he affiliated? I don't know. Who's he affiliated with?
He was another kid at the party. He wasn't on the track team. He wasn't on the wrestling team.
he is who I got your name from, because he said, my friend Sam, captain of the cross country team.
Dylan Weintraub. I'd have to look him up.
He was hanging out with you that night. He remembered going to the wrestling party with you. I'm trying to think of another name. Stefano Ballesteros.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. That one sounds familiar. There's like different people I was hanging out with that like aren't on the track team.
So those guys, Stefano and Dylan, they're the ones that described you pulling Anthony and Dammion apart, or pulling Anthony off Dammion, and then leaving. And then according to them, they thought that y'all went back to Mountaineer Village and went to a place that they called like the Track House.
Doesn't ring a bell to me. I didn't hang out in Mountaineer Village very often.
Okay.
So it's very possible that it's just like there was nothing good was happening over there. So I don't know.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense because the place that Dammion's alleged to have bought drugs from that night was also at Mountaineer Village. So I understand if it wasn't a place where you wanted to be around, or it didn't seem like a good.
I think I was like a sophomore. My first semester was there, and I hated that place. So I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like it was one of those popular places for students to live, just because
it's right next to the campus. It's very accessible. There's a lot of people there. I don't know. It's just like classic college apartment vibe.
Totally. That was my impression of it too. And so you weren't aware of like an apartment there where a bunch of track kids lived that they called the Track House?
Not specifically that they called the Track House.
Okay. Yeah, a couple different people have said that like the pole vaulters lived there.
Potentially.
Yeah.
But the pole vaulters are pretty tame guys.
Since Sam is an actual eyewitness to the fight between Dammion and Anthony, I wanted to see what else he remembered. Did you have an understanding as to why Dammion and Anthony were fighting at all?
I think Anthony was talking about some girl or something, or he got invited over there, and as soon as he got there, he got attacked. And so he was just really upset, like crying and having a hard time. That's I think all I remember. So yeah, you mentioned like after the fight, Anthony was upset and you were trying to... He was like sad. He was like, it wasn't like, yeah. You don't remember if you talked about what the fight was about? That's as detailed as you remember it, or? Yeah, he was just kind of talking about, I don't get why he invited me over there. And would the name Marlena Romero ring any bell for you? No. I had to try, right? That's the girl that's come up as possibly being the source of the fight, that had previously dated Dammion, and then Anthony might have been talking to her. And unfortunately, I was just so not in this crowd. It was freshmen wrestlers, and I just was so much older and wasn't affiliated. That's why I don't feel like I have any information, because I didn't know any of these people. Yeah. Besides Tyler Gates. Okay. Yep. Tyler Gates. All right. Because that's who someone sent the snippet.
As you might recall, Gunnison Police recorded an interview with Tyler Gates when they were trying to determine who dropped acid with Dammion.
He was on the cross-country team. Yes.
And so someone sent you a snippet of Tyler Gates
talking or something.
Okay, in my podcast, and that's
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Tyler, I don't even think he went to this party, but his name got thrown around in this whole crazy situation. Yeah. He got thrown around as someone who possibly might have done acid with Dammion.
I doubt that. I highly doubt that.
I told Sam that Tyler Gates was equally incredulous when he was interviewed by police. The tip that came in was someone from the cross-country team named Travis or Tyler did acid with Dammion. That was the tip.
I don't even think we had a Travis, and I definitely don't think Tyler.
Yeah, you didn't have a Travis that I found. I found 3 Tylers. There was Tyler... I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it right, but like Sayaz.
Tyler
Size. Okay, so that was him, and he had like a broken ankle. He was like on crutches. He was like, I didn't go anywhere. I certainly didn't like drop acid with Dammion that night. That's what he said. And then Tyler Gates
he was just like, I didn't even go out that night. I was just hanging out at the dorm, and, I don't know anything about that. And then there's another Tyler that I found that the police didn't talk to, and I haven't been able to get in touch with either, but his name's Tyler Rasmussen.
Yeah, no, he was an assistant coach probably at that time.
He was listed as like a volunteer coach, which I'm like,
yeah, he was like to been like 29, 30, and okay. I don't even know if he was living in Gunnison at the time.
That doesn't sound like a very good possibility. It's just so weird, like the specificness of the tip. Travis or Tyler on the cross country team did this with Dammion, and it came in like multiple people had said this, and so it was just strange. It seemed like, at first blush, like a really good tip because it was detailed enough, but it just it's never panned out and never made sense. I mean, also, sometimes people just say crazy things to try to, mess stuff up or get
that's annoying.
Wrong. Yeah, like go the wrong direction. So you just don't know. You don't know what people's motivations are for saying these things,
Right.
It's just bizarre. But your impression of Tyler Gates, he would not be dropping acid?
No.
It's impossible to know for sure, but I feel pretty confident that Dammion did not do acid with a member of the cross-country team on the night of the party.
If you go back to that place and you've pulled them apart, right, and you're walking with Anthony, calming him down, he's upset, crying, you said. Do you remember what you did next? Did you continue to hang out with Anthony that night?
I don't think I just didn't hang out with Anthony, so I think I just made sure he went somewhere and not back to that house.
Okay. Do you remember the next day? It was Sunday. Do you remember anything about that day?
Oh, well, I remember the next day we had a long run. I remember Anthony just saying how he got in a fight and on the run and whatever.
And I have heard that, I think, from Tyler Gates, that there was practice the next day, that Sunday.
Yeah, we had practice every day, but Sundays were, for us, it's usually pretty tame nights because we have 15, 17-mile runs.
Oh, wow. And so you remember Anthony still kind of talking about that fight on that run, or just
vaguely
kind of came up a little bit, just as it had happened? Where did you guys run that morning? Would you remember that Sunday?
It was a winter, so we probably went down the frontage road towards Craner Hill and probably did that loop over to Mill Creek area, that neighborhood.
Okay.
And doing a loop on those frontage roads out that way, most likely. That or the frontage road. We just didn't really have any options. It was mostly roads. So I think that's probably what we would have done that day.
Okay. And so when you guys would go running, did you ever go to parks or trails or anything, or you just ran on
in the spring and fall when you can? Otherwise, in that time of the year, it's snow.
Sam mentioned a number of locations around Gunnison, including Hartman Rocks Recreation Area and Mill Creek. Naturally, I wanted to ask about Cabin Creek, where Dammion's body was found.
Did you ever run at the place called Cabin Creek?
I don't know what that is.
It's just another one of the trails around.
No. Is it towards the Mesa?
So I'm not that familiar with the area, but it's off Highway 50. Going east towards Pueblo.
No, you wouldn't run there.
I was glad I got to talk to Sam and clear the air about topics I'd been curious about for years.
Did the police ever contact you as someone who had been at the party or had been in contact with Dammion? Were you someone that they ever...
No, they didn't. I don't know why.
Because your name came up in several different interviews, with people that the police did talk to. And so I just didn't know if they ever contacted you,
No, they did not.
I was curious what, if anything, Sam had heard about the cause of Dammion's death.
What did you remember hearing about what might have happened to him?
I mean, I didn't hear really much speculation. I think people just thought it was kind of a suicidal thing. That was my always understanding, I guess. I didn't think anything further, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, that's completely legitimate. I just, you don't know until you ask. So
Yeah.
Because one of the rumors involved the track team, I wanted to get Sam's opinion on it.
there's so many different stories and theories and rumors of what happened to him that were really active back in 2014 and continued to circulate and stew, even today. And so it's strange to me just how many different stories that are out there. On the one hand, it's a party, it's college, it's, a pretty horrific event to have happen. And so people are going to talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, I get that. But there's just a lot of really specific sort of rumors, that have never fully been tracked down or vetted or, made sense of. And so I didn't know if you had heard any of those, but one of the ones I was talking about, that he did acid with somebody on the cross country team named Travis or Tyler. And then there were several wrestlers at this time, back in 2014, that in their interviews with police, that they said that they had heard that the track team beat up Dammion and hung him from jumper cables. And so that was one of the things that was said by different members of the wrestling team.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I didn't know.
We're just a bunch of skinny runner kids. Like, you wouldn't, I don't know, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty bold thing to say, and, you just kind of wonder why they would say that or where they might have heard that, It was always communicated, like when they told the police that, they would say that they heard it from someone else. I heard this, I just heard people talking. I heard, they weren't saying like, this is what I think happened. They heard it from other people, but, we don't know if there really was another source or if it's coming from their own heads or, what. And part of the strangeness of it is that Dammion was hung from jumper cables. And so that part of the detail, is verifiable. Now, obviously, the police position is that he committed suicide and hung himself from his jumper cables. And that might very well be the case, but it just, in a situation like this where you have so many different witnesses and so many different theories, it just, to me, it's important to talk through all of them and just try to get to, as many people as you can that might know something about it. So I don't know if you're still in touch with Anthony at all.
I am not. I'm sorry.
Because I've tried to get in touch with him, and I don't know if any of my communication has gotten through to him either.
If anyone listening to this podcast knows Anthony Rios, aka Anthony Thomas, please let him know that I'm trying to get in touch. You can contact me at tips@finaldaysonearth.com. Can't get enough of Dammion's story? You're in luck. Part 2 of episode 13 is available now. Final Days on Earth is recorded in Dallas, Texas for Cold Case Productions in partnership with Podcast One and Live by Live. Each episode is written, reported, and produced by me, Claire Sandoval. Original theme music composed and performed by Riley Simmons. Songs licensed from PremiumBeat.com are Bending Truth and A Thin Line. Editorial consultant is Lucy Scott of LucyMedia.com. Additional production help from Amber Robinson, Janice Sue, and Elise Weber. Executive producers are Sharon Richards and me, Claire Sandoval. Special thanks to Jamie Heard, Joe Montiano, and Sam Vandeveld for talking to me in this episode.
Progressive presents Forced Metaphors about bundling your home and auto. In sports, 3 goals is a hat trick. And when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, you get a hat trick of great savings and round-the-clock protection. So you might be thinking, wait, that's 2 things. A hat trick is 3. But in this metaphor, great savings counts as 2 goals, and so does round-the-clock protection. So it's like 4 goals, and that's more